Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today we'll be covering the short film In the Valley of the Moon, written and directed by Luca Pizzoleo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but we'll find out later because after I give my initial thoughts on the film, he'll be joining me on here to answer some questions and talk about the film as well. And as always, spoilers ahead. Real quick before I start discussing this film, just because the writer and director Luca is coming on here doesn't mean I'm not going to say the good and the bad of the film. Just know that anytime I'm talking about a film on here, I'm giving you my authentic thoughts. With that being said, let's get into it. I took a chance watching this film because it really didn't fit into the typical category for this podcast of horror, psychological thriller. I was really hoping that the thriller aspect of it would give me enough to talk about, and I wasn't sure if it would, especially because it's a short film. Lucky enough for me, I did find the film entertaining, engaging, and overall I did enjoy it. I always give extra props to any indie film that decides to do a period piece because I can only imagine the extra care and attention to detail that needs to go into the film to nail it. So with this film, I was really intrigued to hear what happened between Mark Green and Tom's dad that ended up earning Mark this scar sometime in his past and how he played a part in getting Tom's dad put in prison. I was a little bummed that they let you infer a lot of that information. I know it is a short film, so it probably is kind of hard to pack in that amount of detail, but I'm just kind of guessing that maybe he was the getaway driver and kind of screwed them over, or maybe he snitched on him. I'm not 100% sure, which I wish I could be. When it comes to the scar on Mark's neck, he talks about how he took food out of a dog's bowl and he shouldn't have. And that seems like a metaphor for he took money from people he shouldn't have. And I'm not sure if this means that he fled a crime scene, got shot in the neck, and ended up stealing money from his partners, or maybe he's already survived one assassination attempt because of something he did to screw over his partners. I felt like if they did spend a little bit more time going into the intricacies of the relationship, it would have made that end gunfight between Tom and Mark that much more visceral. I love that this film built tension perfectly. Like when Tom says he's a freelance photographer and Mark asks, "Oh, what do you shoot?" And he's like, "Mostly people." Like, that's just so great. And then later when Mark is handing the business card over and it looks like he's doing a gun pull out of his vest, love that. And I love the creative way that Tom ended up fooling Mark to end up getting the kill shot on him. Also, I'm going to confirm this with Luca a little bit later, but let's see if I'm right. I felt like Mark Green's name was symbolic. So what could Mark Green mean? Well, Mark is commonly used for something like a target, and since this is a hitman movie, he is the mark. And then green, you're green at something when you're new to something. So he's either the new target, or maybe it's green because he didn't do real estate before. He clearly led a life of crime and now he's new to real estate. And if this is all imagined, that was a great coincidence. So I didn't mind at all that Sam killed Tom in the end. I was just hoping that there was going to be some ulterior motive in this hitman, mob, dad's in prison story that's going on, rather than you stole my car, bang, fuck you. I think that these things could have been added in this short film, but to keep it under the 30-minute mark like they had it, something else would probably have to go. But this is why I think that this film could totally benefit from a full-length feature, because I think there are plenty of little twists and subtleties in the story that could easily be expanded upon and just make it that much better. And now for the joke moral of the story. You can take a lot from a man, his job, his hope, his dignity, but what you don't take if you expect to live is his Mustang, because those things drive through crowds of people for fun. All right, so now we have Luca on here, and then Luca, can you please tell me exactly how you pronounce your last name first?
It's pronounced Pizzoleo. So Luca Pizzoleo. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I tried Googling it and then trying to look for pronunciations of it. Couldn't find anything. Started scouring behind the scenes stuff of yours. And I'm like, come on, someone say his last name.
Something, yeah. Everyone gets it. Everyone usually gets it wrong. It's like Pizzolio,
Yeah.
but it's okay. It's a confusing name. I'd be confused too. My middle name is even crazier. It's Massimiliano.
Okay, yeah. I wouldn't have even tried that one.
I have no idea how to spell it sometimes. I remember I was at the DMV and I had to call my mom and I was like, how do you write my last name? Like, how do you even spell this out? So it gets confusing.
All right, man. Well, firstly, dug the film. It was definitely a good watch. And it's cool that it's free on YouTube, because there's no like barrier to entry for anyone to check out some cool art.
For sure. And I feel like right now, at the stage that I'm at, especially with just making short films, I feel like I don't really want to have, like you said, a barrier to entry. I just want people to be able to watch my stuff as easy and as digestible as possible. And I feel like YouTube's a perfect platform to do that.
Something I noticed about the film in general too is that it's been out for a few weeks on YouTube and it's already been watched quite a bit. Do you attribute that to anything in particular?
Most definitely our TikTok. So I started my TikTok about, I think, a few months ago, and I feel like it's been something that people have been recommending me to do for a really long time. And they've told me you've had, I just sort of have a lot of content that I feel like would translate really well on TikTok. And I decided to give it a shot. It did really well. I think I have like 50,000 followers now over the course of like a month. And it's really cool having people watch your stuff and then go to your YouTube and then go to the letterbox and they give their own little like theories on your film and whatnot. So most definitely the TikTok and other forms of social media, those have all attributed to the traffic on the YouTube channel for sure.
Well, that's really cool that you've been able to experience that kind of growth that quickly and that you have people loyal enough to then go and check out your other platforms as well. That's awesome.
No, for sure. For sure. We're super happy and grateful for that.
I feel like that's not something that is super common either. It seems like, especially with TikTok, they seem like they just do TikTok. And so it's cool that you found the people that will ride for you other places.
It's great. And we're really grateful for anyone who has kind of jumped from the TikTok and over to the YouTube or the Instagram. It's really, really, flattering for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a few questions I wrote down just in case I forget them. The first thing that I noticed like when I was watching this is that, like, cause you only get like a 30-minute window into these characters' lives. And so like when you wrote this film, do you establish beforehand, like their backstories?
For sure. For sure. That's something that whenever I write a script and I have characters, with Mark Green and Thomas, I gave the actors a sort of about a page description of their backstory, their upbringing, and then what led them to this moment here. And so I give every actor, I feel like, a decent backstory, nothing where it's so specific that they have no room to play, because I do believe the actor should have some form of freedom in coming up with certain things that will help, for their motivation and their character. But I most definitely have everything kind of planned out where, Mark Green did this to Thomas, and that's why Thomas is here, and this is why Samson acts this way. And so that way, in the end, it makes sense for the actors how they're sort of, executing the scene.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I hadn't even considered that part about if you do too much, then the actor might feel like they can't add anything to the role.
I've heard it from a lot of actors, and even with Jessica Chastain on Interstellar, I was watching an interview, and she was saying how she crosses out the scene direction because she feels like the scene direction can be limiting, because she has to sort of, if it says she puts the book to her right, maybe she feels like it's so, I have to, okay, now I got to put the book to my right and blah, 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 blah. Unless it really like the action needs to happen for the scene. I feel like a lot of times actors do want the room to play. Some actors, they do enjoy having more of a controlled environment, if that makes sense. But I feel like a lot of actors do like to have a little bit of freedom in creating something for them.
So when you're writing a script and just this entire story, how do you like, what's that writing process like? Like, where are you getting the ideas? How long does it take you to write this? Where do you choose to write?
So in terms of getting ideas, I feel like the majority of my ideas stem from music. So the idea for Valley actually came from Irma Thomas's Breakaway, which is like I think like 60s or 70s song. And I was just listening to it in my bedroom, and I kind of got this idea, and I was like, man, that would be funny if there was like a mobster realtor. Like, I thought that was just hilarious to me. And so I sort of kind of wrote out a little idea, and then that expanded into about a 10 or 12 page script within, I think, like 4 days. And then I sent that over to Roz Fritz and Ryan Emilio Molina, who are Thomas and Mark, to get their sort of feedback. And they've been my best friends for, upwards of like 10 years now. And so I sent that to them and some other close family and friends, got some feedback, and then eventually wrote out the final draft, which took me about a month and a half, maybe 2 months to write out. Uh, and then really shortly after, we just started filming.
So, how old are you? Because I think when I was seeing some things, you were like surprisingly young.
I'm 24, so I turned
24 now.
24. Yeah, so I turned 24 in August of last year, so I'm getting up to 25 now.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive that you're already making stuff that is this good. So kudos to you. And so that makes me wonder, like, like what was your biggest inspiration? Like, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing film really, I mean, my whole life. I think it was it was funny because I was talking to my mom not too long ago, and she was telling me that when I was a kid, she would be recording on the camcorder, and I would always just try to take it and film stuff. And so I've always had a love for film, and I always think back on really my earliest memory of watching a film, and it was Alfred Hitchcock's Birds. I think I was 4, which was like crazy young, but my dad would watch TCM and he didn't really care if like I sat in, and so I was watching that and I just kind of fell in love and was completely enamored with how a film was made, and it sort of turned into an obsession. And that was just, I watched movies all the time. And I, even during quarantine, I tried to watch like a movie or 2 movies a day, and I would watch a movie in the morning, maybe a movie at night. And it's just like every time you watch a movie, I feel like you learn so much more about filmmaking. And then when you go out and actually kind of tackle it, then that turns into you fail a lot. And then eventually you kind of come back and you learn sort of so many new things. So I've really been doing it as long as I can remember. And short films have just been, I've been putting out short films consistently for at least like the last like 6-ish years, short films for
Nice.
sure. Yeah.
Crazy. You're watching something that, is like, I guess, classic when you're 4.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of traumatic a little bit. Like it was
Yeah,
scary.
I could imagine. So I saw on, I think it was on your Instagram when you were doing like a Q&A, you talked about how you shot this film twice. Once you, and then once your now DP of this film. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is always a funny story to me because every film prior to Valley, I was the writer, director, producer, and I also was the DP. And it's sort of something you hear all the time, is try not to wear too many hats because the project inevitably suffers from that. And it's true. It's very true. And I look back at a lot of my older works and I see things that the director I am now, I would change within the actors, or things I would like to change in the scene. And a lot of that I attribute to the fact that I really just wasn't as focused. I had to focus on the camera and making sure the frame was good and the focus was on. And so Valley was really no different. I actually didn't have any contact with any DPs for the longest time. I met a couple people, but they sort of wanted, like $1,000 a day, which was insane for me as a young filmmaker.
Right.
And I had a friend of mine, his name is Jeremy. And Jeremy, I've known him for, I'd say close to about the same time, about 10 years. We went to middle school together. He's a little bit younger than me. So Jeremy's only 22, and he shot Valley when he was 21. So he's obviously a very talented,
Wow.
camera operator, director of photography. So Jeremy actually works on Below Deck, which is a Bravo like reality
That's hilarious.
show.
I've binged like 15 seasons of that recently.
Oh,
I also like gutter TV.
Yeah, no, Jeremy's, if you watch Below Deck, that's Jeremy on there.
That's
He's
awesome, man.
operating one of the cameras.
Good
And
for him.
so he was, I believe he was in Malta or something. I don't remember. He was somewhere, in Europe. And I kind of asked him like, "Hey man, are you free to help me shoot this movie?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "I'm actually in Malta right now." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Well, I really want to get this movie done, and I have everything planned. We've done tons of rehearsals. We got the costumes, and the house that we were going to shoot at, which was the house that we got in the film, was only available for a certain amount of time. And I believe that was like October to November-ish. And we were just in the middle of October. So I really wanted to get going. And we went on there and we shot the film. We literally shot the entire movie. I mean, like the entire movie. And then when I got home and I was like, oh, yeah, and I looked at all the footage, I was like, man, this is bad. It's really bad.
Oh
You know,
no.
like I'm not a camera operator. I'm not a DP. I think I do have a decent eye, but I feel like there are so many shots that were out of focus. There was so many light, like so much of the lighting was off. Just everything looked terrible. And so Jeremy was flying back after his season in Below Deck, and I sort of just asked him, I said, "Can you please help me save this movie? Because I've already put so much into it." And he's like, "Yeah." And so I booked another 2 days at the house. And I told my actors, I'm like, "Hey, we're going back to the house." And they're like, "Going back to the house for what?" And I was like, "Just some pickups, man. Just some pickups. That's all we're doing." We get there and then we start scene one and they're like, "Didn't we already shoot this? Like, 2 weeks ago?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." So we ended up shooting, I mean, the film literally twice. And I actually I'm actually not mad about it because I do feel like in some ways it did make the acting a lot stronger because of the fact that the actors were able to be in costume and be in the location. And it was almost like kind of like an expensive rehearsal, you know?
Right.
And there are certain things that did make it into the final cut that I shot. So in the shootout sequence is all my stuff, and like kind of the whole, like when he's going in the kitchen, he grabs a cookie, everything from there to almost the ending is my stuff. So I did use that. We didn't have time to reshoot that portion of the film, but yeah. So it's not something I would do again. In the future, I've learned I'm not going to shoot my own movies. I'm going to get a DP for sure. But yeah, that was mainly kind of the process of shooting a short film twice.
So that was the reason I was asking, because I was gonna say, like, did you have to re-rent out the location, like get a Mustang again? You get it, like, I don't know if you were like renting wardrobe, if you bought wardrobe. I was like, what
we
does that look like?
we did have to do a lot of that with the wardrobe. Some of that was purchased, so I went to just various vintage shops and thrift stores around LA. And so Thomas's his whole costume is just from the thrift store, and some of it was rented. And even with the ending in particular, I rewrote the ending 4 days before we shot it. So there was already an original ending in mind, and the ending was two people coming into an open house and they see Thomas walking out and they sort of are like, "Holy shit," and they run out and scream because he's covered in blood. Thomas gets in his Mustang and drives away, and that's sort of the end of the movie. And it wasn't something that I really loved. I wasn't in love with that ending. And so I rewrote it where Samson came back. And that was always kind of something that I did have in mind, but I didn't know if we were gonna be able to pull it off because of scheduling and availability with some of the actors. But we back on the rental thing, we actually had Landon's costume rented and I returned it 4 days before, or like the night before I rewrote the ending. So then I was like, holy
Mm.
shit, I just returned the costumes and I just rewrote this. So then I had to go back the next morning. I'm like, "Hey, listen, I need this back." And I had to go to like 4 different stores to get all the stuff back. And some of it's a little off. Landon's watch is different in the ending from
Mm.
the beginning. So that was one thing. We couldn't get the same watch. But yeah, so it was definitely a hassle getting all that stuff re-rented for the ending, and making sure everyone is available. That's always the struggle of an indie film for sure.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad that that all came together. And when I was thinking about that whole scenario, I was thinking, so when you set out to shoot a horror, or not a horror, a short film, obviously hiccups can happen like this, which happened after the fact. But like, were there any major, just things that you did not see or foresee coming, but just happened? Like, I don't know, like bad weather or like, just stuff like that that kind of fucks up the whole process.
There was quite a few hiccups on this film, I will say. There was a lot of scheduling issues. So we had tons of scheduling issues where we were booked and everyone said they were available. And then it was just like the next day, no one, like multiple people had to pull out. There was weather issues where, the whole film obviously takes place at the open house within really a couple hours. And so we had to shoot that over really like 3 days, and 3 days over the course of a month. Sometimes we had cloudy days, sometimes we had really sunny days. And so a lot of times we had lighting that wasn't necessarily similar to the last shoot day. We also had a lot of issues with the car. The car was we actually rented a different Mustang. I mean, when we first shot the film, and it was a yellow Mustang, and then when we went to go like shoot the final Mustang scenes, we were going to re-rent it, and the Mustang wasn't available to rent anymore. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I don't rent it out anymore. Someone like got it and damaged it, so now I'm like not renting it out." And so I was like, "Oh my god!" And so we had to rent a different Mustang, which was the red Mustang, and then shoot all the scenes that we had already had with that in mind.
Good
Um,
Lord.
I mean, it was really like honestly, it was a nightmare to shoot this
Yeah,
movie.
that sounds awful.
I was talking with Roz and Ryan and even Jeremy about this. I was like, this movie, when I look back on it, I feel like I was just so stressed out and just like a nutcase during the whole production of it. And then I look back on Frenchman, which we just shot not that long ago, and I don't know if you got a chance to see the trailer of that, but that film was like a cakewalk. I mean, everything that we kind of fumbled with on Valley, we took that, learned, and applied it for Frenchman. So I'm glad, we had all those hiccups because it's just something you learn. But yeah, no, it was a nightmare, really, to say the least. I mean, it really was.
So, with all the headaches, and then now it's done, now it's out, you're crushing in the film festivals and people are watching it. Like, what does that feel like now?
I mean, it feels amazing when you set out to make a movie. I feel like to some extent it is so vulnerable because it's something that you sort of just kind of put all your blood, sweat, and tears into. You wrote this is your thing. And even from the actors, especially, you have like Ryan and Roz, who are really kind of like putting themselves out there. And it's something that I do believe is like a very vulnerable thing. So when you put something out and it has such a positive reception, it definitely feels great. And you sort of feel like all the hard work has paid off. But at the end of the day, too, even if the reception wasn't necessarily amazing, I feel like I would still be happy because I'm happy with the film. I made the film really, really just for me. And that's who I wrote the film for. So as long as I'm happy with the project, then I feel like that's all that really matters. And obviously, I do think that there are some criticisms that I've heard about the film that are most definitely valid and I'm very objective when I look at my own work. So it's not like I just look at them like this is a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect movie. Nothing's wrong with it. I definitely look at my own work and I can see things that can be improved upon. And that's why I do feel like, every time we've done a project, it's just improved on the last one. And not to bring up Frenchman again, but it's a massive improvement on Valley, just on every technical aspect alone for sure. So it really is very, very nice to see just the amount of positive reception. So we're really grateful for all like the shares, and we've had like fan art and edits on TikTok.
Nice.
It's weird, but it's like awesome. It's great. Like I think it's really cool. So we're I mean, thrilled, honestly. And even too, we've had with the TikToks, because of how well they've done, I've been posting TikToks about Frenchmen, and even like 90% of the Valley TikToks, people are just commenting, "Oh, when's Frenchman coming out? When's Frenchman coming out?" So there's already people, gearing up and waiting for that film. So I mean, I really there is no words to describe like how happy we are.
Heck yeah. So, what genre is that Frenchman movie?
So Frenchman is a dark comedy,
Okay.
and it basically follows two best friends who accidentally kill their French drug dealer, and now they must figure out how to get rid of his body. And in the process of doing that, they go to their kind of quirky movie crazed acquaintance, and they try to enlist him to help them with figuring out how to get rid of the body. And so it's very much like there's tons of homages to other films in there, and there's a scene in the trailer where they're, putting his body in a wood chipper, kind of like Fargo. And so
Hmm.
there's tons of like nice little like homages to the film, but to film in general. So it's very fun. It's different to what I've done. I've never done a dark comedy, and I feel like that's sort of been. I think you can see some of that in Valley, like especially with the cookie, just like very little things where I feel like I was kind of dipping my toes into throwing a little bit of comedic relief in there. Um, but with Frenchmen, we just kind of went full force, and we're so like I mean, we love the project. It's really my favorite film I've made for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like something I definitely want to check out. When does that come out?
So we don't have a set release date on the film as of now, since we have to go through the whole festival process. So honestly, like if I'm being, realistic here, it's probably going to be about a year until we
Mm,
get a full, open
yeah.
release. Valley took about a year. You with a lot of these festivals, you're not allowed to have them on YouTube or even screened in any sort of way. And it makes sense,
Hmm.
obviously, because the festivals want to prioritize people coming to the festivals to watch your films. Um, so it's going to be quite a while, but we'll definitely, keep everyone updated on like screenings and locations whenever we get those soon.
Do you have like a major goal with your career? Like something that, once this happens, you're like, I made it.
I don't think I'll have a specific thing. It's not like, oh, once I get an Oscar or once I get this or once I get that. I don't think that's really I don't have a sort of set goal for that in mind. It's more of I just want to make movies. That's really all I want to do. So once I get to the point to where I am making feature films consistently, that will be kind of my happy place. And I already am very happy in even just what I'm doing now, because really I have such a love for filmmaking that just making these short films is really great. And obviously I have higher aspirations to make bigger things, but it's not sort of like, oh, once I make my first feature, I'm good, I'm done, I did it, mission accomplished. But that is most definitely, I would say, my main goal is to be making features and to be making them in a consistent way. That would be my goal for my career.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I did want to ask you, someone on Instagram asked how you went about funding the film.
So with Valley and Frenchman in particular, they were both, I mean, incredibly cheap. I mean, honestly, even though Valley sounds insanely expensive, it really was not. I mean, it was below $10,000. And I mean, honestly, like kind of significantly below that. So the film was done on like a micro budget, and Frenchman was done on like a quarter of Valley's budget. And with the funding in particular, a lot of it is just from me self-funding the projects. And so in between short films, I work on music videos, commercials, and I also do photography. And so I've had my photography sold in Home Goods and Home Sense across like the United States and Canada. And so I had a deal with them that started about 2 years ago. And so they've been selling my photography for I think about 2 years now. And that sort of deal has allowed me to fund my films without necessarily having to worry about where I'm going to get the funding. And even too, I've had help from friends and family, and Roz, who's the lead actor in Valley, helped executive produce Valley, so he paid for certain things on set. So that's mainly how we fund the films.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I hate the excuse of a bad movie is when they had, oh, like if they had a bigger budget, it would have been better. And then like I hear about films like this and, under $10,000 and you made like something that's 30 minutes that's super entertaining and you didn't even charge for it. So it's not like you're expecting to recoup the money. Like it could just be an investment of time and money and all that. And that is what it is. And it's still good. And so it
For
frustrates me
sure.
when people blame the budget on quality.
It's something that frustrates me too. And when you see movies, there's certain movies that I've seen that are $100 million movies that I just cannot stand, and even the audience has not enjoyed. So money has absolutely nothing to do with quality of the story and the acting. Those sorts of things are not, one and the same. It's something that I've noticed with a lot of indie filmmakers, because I've gotten so many questions about, oh, well, I want to make a short film, but I don't have an Arri Alexa or a Red Epic or whatnot. And that's kind of another thing where you don't need to have the most expensive equipment possible. You don't need to have, $100,000-$200,000 budget to make a good movie. And so that's definitely something I totally agree with you on.
Yeah, what was this film shot on?
This was shot on a Sony A7S III.
Okay, that's what I thought from like the behind the scenes stuff. I was like, that looks
Yeah.
like a Sony camera, but it looks, like red or, airy quality. So that's cool.
It's been a very nice compliment, and I, that's really just hats off to Jeremy, because Jeremy knows all the little magic, settings on the Sony to just make it so beautiful. And even when you watch Frenchman, it looks like it's shot on a different camera because it looks even higher quality, but it's just the same camera. We really only invested in more time at the locations and more lighting setup. So once really any camera, as long as the lighting is decent, you can make any camera look good, even an iPhone, honestly.
Before I forget, I needed to ask you about this because I said this in the very beginning of the podcast, and I'm so glad that I remembered. Anyway, Mark Green.
Yes.
Is his name symbolic for anything?
So his name is actually not. So I didn't really have like a deeper meaning behind Mark Green. He did have a name prior, which was his name before he became Mark Green. And that is all I really gave to Ryan. I was like, this was your name before Mark Green. Mark Green is just really a kind of, I was like, what is the most basic, and not to offend anyone the name is Mark Green, but like what's like the dumbest, most basic name I could think of that sounds fake? It would be Mark Green. And when I was thinking of it too, and I did write out Mark, I was like, oh, Mark, like cool. That actually kind of sounds like he's like a mark, like he's a target, whatnot. And so I thought about that after, but the initial thought, like honestly, was just like, that's a stupid name.
Yeah, when I said it in the beginning of this podcast, I was like, this could all be conjured basically in my head, and that seems to be often how it is. And I feel like that's the cool thing about movies is you don't always know what's symbolism and what's not. But yeah, I was like, Mark Green, I was like, all right, Mark, like he's the next target. And then Green, because I've been watching so much Below Deck, they constantly use the term green, like when they have like new deckhands on there and whatnot. And I was like, so he's the new target or the next target. I was like, or great. Because he had, like a criminal background, like he's new to realty. And I was just like, God, like that's so sweet. I was like, but we'll figure it out if it's actually anything.
That's hilarious. And, that's great, actually. But to that point exactly, there's a Japanese filmmaker. His name is Seijun Suzuki. I don't know if you've seen, I believe it's Tokyo Drifter. I believe that's the name of the film. It's this film from the 60s. And it's on the Criterion channel, and they did an interview with him and his producer after the film. And the film is insanely stylized. If you watch the film, it reminds you very much of like a Tarantino movie. And so watching the film in the beginning of it, it's completely black and white, and there's this toy gun on the ground, and that's the only thing in color. And they sort of show all these interviews of these people going, oh, like what does it mean? It means this and it means that, and I believe he's trying to talk about society and blah blah blah. And then they show the director, and he's like, well, honestly, we just had black and white film, and I thought that would be cool. Like that's really all it was. So but I actually love that. I love hearing like people's thoughts and ideas of what is symbolism. But there definitely is a lot of symbolism in Valley, I will say. And everything was not just like, oh, that's cool, whatnot. Like even in the beginning of the film, there's a fade transition of Roz or Thomas holding the gun to the mirror, and then it fade transitions over Mark walking in and then pushing in that cabinet. And when he's walking in, it sort of looks like a crosshair right on Mark as he's walking in.
I missed the crosshair part. And I did say beforehand how much I love the gun pull of the business card. That was great.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's another one. I was like, pull it out like a gun, aim it at him like a gun. So yeah, no, definitely.
Which also made it onto the movie poster, which is
great.
It
did. Yeah, it definitely did.
What's next? Like, what's the next project beyond the Frenchman movie? Because I'm sure like you're saying, it's a year out, and you got film festivals to do and whatnot.
So right now, obviously, our focus is on whatever that next project is. And I've sort of written a lot of ideas out and things that I kind of want to tackle, but I feel like I'm kind of at that point in my career where I've done so many short films, especially honestly, like these kind of like hybrid short films, because they're not necessarily just these 10-12 minute shorts. They're much longer format and almost are like a TV show episode. So I really would like to work on a feature next. That would be my goal. So within the next year to 2 years, I will have made my first feature. That's my goal. But in the short term, it would just be focusing on making sure that Frenchman is good, because honestly, it kind of is like a full-time job dealing with the festivals, because you have to get DCPs made and promotional material and this and that, and you're working on stuff for the Instagram and the TikTok and all that stuff. I do on my own, and I create all on my own. So that kind of is like a job in itself. So in the short term, Frenchman, long term would be working on whatever the next project is that will turn into a feature.
And so this full length feature that you want to start, is that going to be one that you write and direct, or are you just trying to direct if anything else comes that way, or is it exclusive?
I'm open really to anything. I feel that my strengths lie in directing, and I was having a conversation with someone not that long ago where I spoke on that exactly, that I've really only, and I do have a love for writing, but honestly, I've really only written out of necessity, because I'm a very firm believer that if the opportunity is not there, you have to make it for yourself. So when it comes to doing these short films, I don't know, I didn't go to film school, so I don't know any, writers that I feel like would be great collaborators. And it's difficult to network when you don't, have something like film school. And so I've really just written out of necessity. So when it comes to a feature, if it gets to the point to where I do have to write it, I'm more than happy to do that. But I am most definitely open to scripts and whatnot. And I've been reading a couple features recently just to see where, that could potentially turn into. So I'm not, sold on it just being something that I've written, but I would love to have a hand in the writing for sure. That would be my ideal thing. Is I have tons of ideas, so I would love to collaborate with someone if that
Right.
would be possible.
That's sweet. I definitely look forward to seeing whatever you do when it's a full length feature too. Like, because that was basically my only complaints with the film, tied to if it were longer, I think it would happen. Like I just want to
Right.
know more about the story. I want to, but like when you're limited to a certain amount of time, like you can only do so much.
Most definitely. And that is, and even too, when it comes to Valley and other shorts I've made, there has been an idea to turn that into a feature. So Valley, I
Mm-hmm.
have an entire idea of what I would do with the feature. And one of those things for sure would be increasing the story of Samson, because I feel like that was something that, looking back on the film, I wish I did differently. And with a lot of people on the ending of the film, I feel like there's some people who didn't like it and there were some people who loved it. And I do like the fact that it's somewhat, decisive in a way, where people aren't, sold on one way or the other. I think it's nice that people have something to say. But if I had a feature, I would most definitely increase his backstory and his character. When I wrote it for Landon, I told him, I was like, he really is like a hothead and he loves his car. This is like a family heirloom. It's very precious to you. So for us, it makes so much sense in the end of the film. But I do see how like some people have said that it seems like it comes out of left field, which I don't know if you felt that way, but I've seen some people.
I did say at the end that I wish that he had more of an ulterior motive that either looped into just being a hitman, the mob, or some sort of tie-in with the dad, rather than it just being the car. But I tied that into my joke moral of the story that, like you could take a lot of people, or you can take a lot from a man, but not his Mustang, because like those, like not if you expect to be alive, because those cars run people over in crowds like for fun. So it's like,
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
course, the Mustang is the thing that sets him off. And, that family heirloom, even if I knew that, I feel like I would understand it a little bit more in the film. But yeah, I felt like if there was almost like this kind of like double agent thing, or if, like he has his own reason why he doesn't like Thomas, just
Of
something like
course.
that,
Yeah,
was something that I would have enjoyed to see. But, like I said, like I don't mind that it went this way, but I would have liked it the other way.
for sure. And even speaking on Thomas and his relationship, even when I was telling Roz and Landon about the characters, I kind of told them that you guys do have kind of this contentious relationship where a lot of the times Thomas I've tried to show that Frank looks at Thomas as almost like a son. And so in some way, Thomas acts like a spoiled brat in certain ways if he doesn't get his way. And so this is something that Samson picks up on. And if we had like a full feature, this would be something that I would show in the beginning. It wasn't just like Samson loves Thomas and he takes his car, so I'm going to kill him. It's sort of, they do have a contentious relationship that sort of evolves. And then the car is really just the last straw. And he's like, you know what? Like, absolutely not. So, but no, I'm happy to hear your thoughts on that for sure.
Well, cool, man. Yeah. Thank you for joining me on the podcast and clearing up some of those things, especially the Mark Green thing, including your last name too.
No,
So
dude, totally. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I really appreciate you having me on. This was great. Great host, and I love your content. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. So if you want to leave your socials, or where people can find the movie, I'll link it down below. But if plug whatever you want.
So you can stay up to date on anything we're doing film wise on my Instagram, which is Luca Pizzoleo. That's LucaPizzoleo. And my YouTube website, everything is all the same, just Luca_Pizzoleo, and you can find me and whatever we're working on next.
Cool, man. I look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.